Today's daf is daf Tes Zayin, and we're up to Amar of Huna, which is approximately 5 lines down from the top of the Amud, and we are trying to reconcile an apparent contradiction between a Mishnah in Masechet Tamid and in a Mishnah in Masechet Midos. And the discrepancy is about the location of the Lishkas Hatloim, and it would seem that according to the Mishnah in Tamid, the Lishkas Hatloim was located at the corner of the Marav Tzafon of the base Moked, whereas according to the Mishnah in Midos, it seems that the Lishkas Hatloim was not in the Tzafon, but rather was in the Daron. And the Gemara suggested one approach to reconcile this contradiction, and that had to do with interpreting the Mishnah according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. However, now the Gemara, in the name of Rav Huna, is taking a different. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's Rav Huna. In the previous approach, we had introduced Rabbi Shimon Ish HaMitzpah. Now we're introducing Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and that's Rav Huna Mantana, who is the author of the Mishnayos in Midos. That's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And if we find one Mishnah that reflects the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, then we can assume that all the Mishnayos in Masechet Midos reflect the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Whereas the Mishnah in Masechet Tamid, which, as we said earlier, has the Lishkas HaTloim located in the Tzafon, not in the Darom, that reflects a different Tana. This now Rav Huna embarks upon his endeavor to prove that the Mishnah in Midos reflects the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. We learned in Masechet Midos, Ezras Noshim, Hoisa Orech, Mea Ushloshim, Vechamesh Amos. So that the Ezras Noshim was 135 amos long, al rochav, with a width of mea ushloshim v'chamesh amos, of 135 amos wide. So it's 135 by 135. And what we're now measuring is both the length and the width. The length is the direction from Mizrach to Mairav, whereas the width is a measurement of north to south, Tzafon to Darom. So we're talking about an Ezras Noshim, which is a perfect square of 135 amos square. Now, until now, we spoke about the Lishakos that were located in the base Moked Eish, but now we're going to talk about the Lishakos that were located in the Ezras Noshim. There too, there were 4 Lishakos, 4 chambers. Arba Lishakos Hayu B'Arba Miktzal said in the 4 corners of the Azara. Uma Hayu Mikshamshos, and what were the names and the functions of these 4 chambers respectively? And the Mishnah establishes the following: Dromis Mizrachis, on the southeastern side, Haiso Lishkas HaNazirim, there was a Lishka that was dedicated for the Nazirim. So this is going to be on the southeastern corner of the Azara. And what went on in this chamber that was earmarked for the Nazirim? The Nazirim had to bring a special karban, which is called a karban shlomim, shalmei nazir. And the halacha was that a nazir, at the termination of his naziris, he brings 3 karbanos, an entire seder of karbanos, ola, chatas, and shlomim. And following the avodas hadam, after the dam was the zrikas hadam on the mizbeach, then the nazir would cut his hair, which he wasn't allowed to do during his nazirus, and he would place his hair into a fire. This fire was underneath a clay bishul in which the shlomim, the meat of the karban shlomim, was cooked. And that process took place in the Lishkas HaNazirim, which is on the southeastern side of the Azara. Megalchen Siorin, Meshalchen Tachas Hadud, and that's where they cooked the basar shlomim. Next, we now move from the southern side to the northern side. And Mizrachis Tzfonis, on the same east but going north now, we get to Haisol Lishkas Dir Ha'etzim. So here there was a special chamber for the logs of wood that would be used on the Maracha of the Mizbeach, for the Esha Mizbeach. And Sham HaKohanim Bali Amumim, those Kohanim who couldn't do the Avoda, we gave them a different job, Omdim Umasliim Ba'etzim. What that means is that they would remove those woods that have toloim in it, that were infested with bugs, with worms, because such eitzim are pasul mizbeach, shekol eitz sheyesh bo tolas pasul legabi mizbeach. So all this is on the eastern side, starting on the south and moving towards the north. Next, we have Tzfonis Maravis. So again, we were on the northeastern side. Now we're moving towards the northwestern side. This is where the Mitzoraim, after they were finished, they restored their health, they did a tefillah, and that tefillah was the preliminary stage that allowed them to be machnis b'honoseim li'ezras Yisrael, to insert, if you will, the big fingers, the big toes that would have to receive the dam ha'asham, which was part of the process of the taras hamitzora. So that's the lishka on the northwestern side. Now we go to the southern side. On the same west, And here the Mishnah in Midos quotes Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, Shachachti ma'hoisam v'shameshes. I don't remember on that corner, which is the southwestern corner of the Azar. I don't know exactly what that chamber functioned. Abba Shol Omer Ba Hayunosnim Yayin V'Shemen. That's where they stored the yayin for the Nesachim, the shemen for the menachos and for the menorah. V'hi'aisa nikres lishkas beis shmanya miloshan shmonim, for the oils. In any event, we see clearly that the Mishnah reflects the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. He again forgot what exactly that fourth chamber functioned, but now we would assume that all the Mishnahs up until this point in Masechet Midos, they all reflect the shita of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So if we have a Stam Mishnah, we're going to assume it's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So the Mishnahs in Midos should be attributed, says Rav Huna, to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, as opposed to the Mishnahs in Talmud that should be attributed to another Tana, some other anonymous Tana. We're now going to quote a Mishnah in Midos to try to prove that the Shita of Masechet Midos is a reflection of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Now, in order to appreciate this Mishnah, we have to know a little bit more about Parshas Chukas, the Parsha of Paraduma, because there the Torah says, "V'hiza el nochach pnei oel moed," which means that the entire preparation of the para, which would begin with shchita, and then the dam was received from the shchita, and then they burnt the para, the Kohen would implement all this avoda on the Har HaZeisim, otherwise known as the Har HaMishcha. And the Torah requires that he stands on the eastern side, which is the entrance into the Mikdash, and he's on the Har HaZeisim facing the entrance into the Beis HaMikdash on the eastern side, but the Torah says that he is required to see with his eyes the Pesach HaHeichal. From the place that he's located, standing on the Har HaZeisim, he should see the Pesach HaHeichal. And the Mishnah tells us that Kol HaKsolim Shayu Sham, all of the walls that surrounded the Har HaBayis and the Azaros, Hayugvoim, they were very tall. They were 20 amos tall, with one exception, Chutz Mikosel Mizrachi. On the eastern side, as we enter into the Har HaBayis, that kosel had to be lowered. And that was the area in which they entered into the Har HaBayis, into the Chel, from the Chel to the Ezras Noshim, from the Ezras Noshim to the Azara. And that wall on the eastern side had to be lowered. And why is that so? Because Shakoin Asarif Sapara Ome Bar Michcha, he's standing on our Zeisim to the east of Yerushalayim. He's shechting the para. He collects the dam of the para and he does hazah. He burns the para. And Mechavein Veroa Keneged Pischo Shel Heichal, he's looking through the east, going towards the west, as we move deeper and deeper towards the Heichal. B'shas hazah sadam, because the Torah says v'izol nochach pnei ol moed. And the problem is that how can he see the Pesach HaHeichal if the wall of the Mizrach side of the Har HaBayis is 20 amos high? He says here, I'm going to just read the translation. He writes that Shara Mizrachi shal Harabayis v'shara Ezras Nochim shara Ezras Yisrael shara Ha'ulam v'shara Heichal hayu mechuvanim zeh keneged zeh. There was a perfect line. Vayu poschim es hashiorim. They would open up all these gates. Kidesha Kohen Yired Darkam Pesach Oil. Through these gates, he could have a vision of the opening of the Heichal. Now, keep in mind that the Harabayis is elevated from the bottom level, which is on the east. Going west, you go higher and higher. Milvada Shara Mizrachi, the only shar that would not be open for the Kohen Hasorif Sapar to see through that shar was the shar on the Mizrachi side. Shahoya Kohen Roes Pesach Oel Mi'al Kosal Mizrachi. He could not see the opening of the Heichal through the opening of the Shar Mizrachi. He'd have to see above the Shar Mizrachi. And that's because of the elevation of the Harabayis. So now that the Kohen has to see above the Kosal Mizrachi, therefore we have to lower the Kosal Mizrachi. Otherwise, that wall would block his vision of the Pesach HaHeichal. Usnana, we learned in the Mishnah in Midos, all of the gateways in the Harabayis and the base of Mikdash was Gvoa Mesrim Amo. They were 20 amos high. V'rochvan Eser Amos, and they were 10 amos wide. And because the Shara Mizrach of the Harabayis was 20 amos high, it would be impossible to see through that shar the Pesach HaHeichal, which was so much higher, because now the Pesach HaHeichal is concealed from the eyes of the Kohen. Usnan. And again, all this makes sense only according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, as we're going to explain now, because we have a Mishnah in Midos that says Lifnim Mimenu, what was going in from the Shar Mizrach in towards the Migdash, going west, was the Soreg, right? The Soreg was a mechitza that was made of very small pieces of wood, that lattice, that would crisscross. And that would tell the Goyim, the Nachris couldn't go beyond the Soreg, and also Tommy Mesh shouldn't go there. In any event, Tanan Lifnimi Menu, we're going now from east to west, moving from the Soreg into the Chel, which was Eser Amos. And the area from the Chel up to the Ezras Noshim was 10 amos. Shtemesrei Malos Hoyushon. In order to climb upwards towards the more elevated western side of the Harabayis, there were 12 steps. And these 12 steps took you basically from the Chel up to the Ezras Noshim. Room Mala, the height of each one of these steps was Chatziyama. Vishilcha, the width was Chatziyama, half an amma. And it went to the length, its length was the entire Rochav of the mountain of the Harabayis, Mitzofan L'Darom. Now, if each one of these 12 steps was 1/2 amma high, it means that the Ezras Noshim was 6 amos higher than the Shara Mizrach. And then we learned in the Mishnah that Chameshes Malos Olos Mitocha, there were 15 steps that led from the Ezras Noshim to the Ezras Yisrael. Or if you're going in the opposite direction, coming out of the Migdash, Yardos mi Ezras Yisrael, Ezras Noshim, you're going down these steps from the higher elevation of the Ezras Yisrael down to the Ezras Noshim. Ru Mila Chatzi Mila V'Shilcha Chatzi Mila. And now we're going to get 7.5 amos to go from the Ezras Noshim all the way to the Ezras Yisrael. And further, the old Tanan, we have another Mishnah in Midos that Bein HaUlam V'Lamizbeach, that you're now in the Azara, which is called the Ezras Kohanim, and now you're climbing up towards the Ulam, which is very close to the Heichal. Esrim Ushtayim Amma, Ushtem Esrei Malos Hoyusham. So the area that separated the Mizbeach from the Ulam was 22 amas long. And now he had to climb another 12 steps. Once again, we're going now from the Ezras Kohanim to the Ulam, Ru Mila Chatzi Am V'Shilcha Chatzi Amma. And therefore, we're adding another 6 amos. So that would mean that from the entranceway into the Ulam and the Heichal, we're talking about another 6 amos high as we climb from the Ezras Kohanim. And from the Ezras Noshim, we were climbing to the Ezras Kohanim 13.5 amos. From the Miftan of the Shar, the entrance of the Shar of Mizrach, we now have, all told, 19.5 amos. Now again, since the Pesach the Pesach of the Heichal is 20 amos high, then it's very feasible, since the height from the Shara Mizrach all the way to the Pesach Heichal is 19.5 amos, so it's very plausible that you could see the Heichal. But to tonight we have a Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer and Yaakov Omer, he adds another mile, another step, Hoisa Sham, at the end of the Ezras Yisrael, and before you entered into the Ezras Kohanim, there was another step, Gavoa Amma, that was 1 amma high. So now we take 19.5 amos and we add another amma with 20.5 amos. And the Mishnah tells us that on that extra step was the Duchan, that's where the Levium would stand and they would sing the Shira. Nasan Oleh was placed on that extra step, both Shalosh Milos, Shal Chatzi Amma, each one of them had a height of a half an amma. And now by adding that extra step, according to Rabbi Eliezer and Yaakov, we begin to understand why the Shar HaMizrach had to be lowered, and there was no possibility for the Kohen HaSorfes HaPara to see the Heichal, the Pesach HaHeichal, because the Pesach HaHeichal was 20 amos high, and the height from the Shar HaMizrach going up the elevation was 20.5 amos, according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. If we understand the Mishnah in Midos and interpret it in the light of the fact that the Kosel Mizrachi was lowered in order to facilitate the Kohen HaSorfes HaPara to see the Pesach HaHeichal through the Shari Azara, the Ezras Nosh, the Ezras Yisrael, is Ke Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. If we attribute it to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who adds another step that separated the Ezras Yisrael from the Ezras Kohanim, and it was 1 amma high, Hainu diskasi le pischa. Now we understand that the opening into the Heichal was covered, and there was no way of seeing through the Pesach Shara Mizrach to the Heichal, because as we said, the height here is more than 20 amma. But if you're going to assume, which cannot be maintained, that the Mishnah in Midos reflects the Shita of the Chachamim, who hold that there was no extra step that you climbed from the Ezras Kohanim to the Ezras Yisrael, or I should say, from the Ezras Yisrael climbing up towards the Ezras Kohanim, then why would we need to lower the Kosel HaMizrachi, Ha'ika Palga di Amsa? There's an additional half an amma of Gova, of height of the Shara Mizrach. The Shara Mizrach is a half an amma higher than the Pesach HaHolchel, the Mischazile Pischo Begaveh. And now the Kohen HaSoref, standing as it were on the Har Zeisim, could see the Pesach HaHeichal through the Shar HaMizrachi, Lav Shmamina. We must conclude, therefore, that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that the author of the Mishnah in Midos, says Rav Huna, is going to be Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Therefore, we'll assume that all the Mishnayos in the Masechet Midos should be attributed to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov until we get to the Shita Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Ada bar Avomar, he rejects this whole thesis. You know why it was impossible for the Kohen HaSoref on the Har HaMishcha to get a vision, a glimpse of the Pesach HaEchal? Has nothing to do with Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, with that extra step that raised the height of the Pesach HaEchal, but rather because of the Shita Rabbi Yehuda Hamani, who is the author of the Mishnayos in Midos. It's none other than Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that the Mizbeach was in the middle of the Azara, and it was located in such a way that it was Keneged HaPesach, and the height of the Mizbeach would conceal the vision of the Pesach HaHeichal. You could not be on the eastern side of the Mizbeach and get a view of the Pesach HaHeichal because of the height of the Mizbeach, and that is the Shita Rabbi Yehuda, that he locates the Mizbeach in the middle of the Azara. As we're going to learn in the Brisa, which is a Brisa in Masechet Zvachim. Therefore, since the Torah requires that the Kohen HaSoref would see the Pesach of the Heichal, it would be impossible for him to do so by looking through the Shar HaMizrachi of the Kosel Mizrachi, because what he would see would be the Mizbeach, that's the height of which would block his vision of the Heichal. The Mizbeach itself, which was located, of course, in the Azor and the Ezras Kohanim, was 13 and a half amos high. Just 1 second. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Cross that out. What I mean to say is that from the east, from the Shara Mizrach, going up to the Azor, you had to climb 13 and a half amos, as we calculated before. And the height of the Mizbeach is 9 plus 1 amma. What do I mean by 9 plus 1 amma? The Mizbeach itself was 9 amos high. However, on top of the Mizbeach, there was Chronos HaMizbeach, and that adds another amma. All told, you've got 10 amos. Now you add that 10 amos to the 13 and a half amos, and you're left with 23 amos, basically. And there's no way, therefore, that you could see through the Shara Mizrach the Pesach HaHeichal, which was 20 amos high. Tanya, we learned in a Brisa